name is Cheyenne Willis, and I'm one of the Frick Collection's Ayesha Bulchandani Education Interns this summer. As part of our Closer Look series, I invite you to consider The Choice Between Virtue and Vice, one of the two large works behind me, created in the mid-16th century by Italian painter Paolo Veronese. The artist was born Paolo Cagliari in 1528 in the city of Verona, from which we derive the name Veronese. Born to a family of stonecutters, Veronese grew up in a cultural environment with a thriving art scene and expressed an early interest in the arts. Interestingly, Veronese did not begin his career as a painter. In his youth, he was drawn to clay and sculpture, but at age 13, he was apprenticed to a local painter named Antonio Badile by his father, as he recognized his son's aptitude in sketching. His early fascination with sculpture and three-dimensional space was one he carried throughout his career and manifested in his works. Let's turn to the paintings. To the left is The Choice Between Virtue and Vice, and to the right is Wisdom and Strength. While our talk will focus on virtue and vice, both were made by Veronese between 1567 and 1568, and, though not intended to be a set, they've been displayed together for centuries on their path to the Frick. Virtue and Vice depicts a man dressed in white between two women, one of which has her back to us. On the left half are two statues gazing in opposite directions, while trees in the sky fill in the rest of the canvas. The work has also been titled The Choice of Hercules, which we see on its frame. This refers to the source material, a myth told by the Greek philosopher Prodicus about the classical hero Hercules. In this scene, Hercules finds himself at a crossroads and must choose between two paths, each guarded by a woman. The first, a pleasurable, simple path with a fair young woman representing vice. The second, uphill and arduous, with an older woman, virtue. When we take Prodicus's myth and compare it to our canvas, we can identify each figure. Virtue, conservatively dressed in green, grasps the man while looking on with an austere gaze. She wears shoes similar to Roman gladiators, and a laurel wreath, like those given to victors in the virtuous in ancient Greece. The face of Vice is hidden from the viewer, but we can see her back, the expanse of exposed skin, her unfastened dress, and the curve of her body as she leans on the statue, all read as sensual and pleasurable. She holds cards in her left hand. Her right is outstretched, and upon close looking, we can see her elongated nails, which have just scratched the man's lower leg. Consider how Veronese's visual choices imply moral messages about women, sexuality, and exposure that are familiar to us as modern viewers. Virtue is demure, while Vice's corporeality stereotypes her as sinful. I next want to highlight the impact of color and brushstrokes in this painting. The intensity of pigment is what first captivated me, and this is regularly cited as one of Veronese's strengths. His ability to render different textures and the way he uses layers of paint to evoke sensation is incredible. Look closely at the jewels on the bodice of Vice, the various lace and fringe details, the hair texture of each figure, the layering of off-whites to show dimension on the man's jacket, and notice how each one creates a different tactile sensation. One of my favorite details is Vice's braided bun and the blue pin she wears that matches her dress. Veronese's color selection for the women's dresses reinforces the conflict between virtue and vice. Virtue's organic color palette of browns and greens, in her laurels, hair, and sandals, connects her to the flora on the right side of the painting through repetition of color. On the other hand, Vice's vivid, ornate dress stands out as man-made, and if we look to the left half of the painting, we see this idea continued in the two sculptures and an inscription in Latin. The statue in the upper left could represent Venus, the goddess of love and sexuality. On the bottom is the Sphinx, a mythological creature that invokes peril and mystery, and we see a dagger next to her. Tools, sculpture, architecture, language, together these symbolize human innovation or the world of man. We can see how Veronese links humanity to vice and artificiality, while the natural world is virtuous. It may be a coincidence that vice is on the left, sinistra in Latin and Italian, related to the English word sinister, and virtue stands on the right, but their placement suggests intentionality. Let's shift to the composition. Notice how each face looks in a different direction, and all the sharp diagonal lines. the various arms and torsos, the falling diagonal that starts with Venus and continues through the clouds, or the rising one created from the Sphinx and the dagger. If we follow the lines, we see that Veronese intentionally leads the viewer's eye to the faces of Hercules and Virtue, underlining the central message and the ultimate victor of the struggle. These stylistic choices pull us immediately into the work, while the dynamism of gazes and strong contrasting diagonals that fill the frame keep our eyes moving. We see another stylistic choice if we look to the bottom of the painting: proportion. The feet of the figures are undersized relative to their height. I hypothesize that this feature came from Veronese's experience with frescoes and ceiling paintings in his early career, such as Villa Barbaro in Mazer, commissioned by the architect Andrea Palladio. Veronese's intimate work with architects gave him a strong sense of perspective, which he used to develop his trompe-l'œil or illusionistic style. During his process, he considered how the viewer's perception changes in relation to the placement of the finished work of art. Given the distorted proportions of the figures, it's possible that this painting was originally meant to hang higher up. The scrutiny of form and spatial dimension separated Veronese from his contemporaries, as the Venetian school of painters were often criticized for neglecting disegno, or quality of design, in favor of colorito, or color. Returning to color, I want to highlight the pigments themselves. Veronese used expensive pigments, such as the red cremesino and blue oltremare, or ultramarine. Their value cannot be overstated. Cremesino was created from Indian kermes, an insect, and ultramarine from lapis lazuli, a semi-precious stone imported from Afghan mines. The prevalence of these materials is unique to Venice, whose artisan sector and international ports established the city as a key location for the trade of luxury goods. I vendicolori, or color vendors, rose in prominence to meet the demand. A major contribution of the vendicolori was the invention of bianco da Venezia, or lead white, which became a defining characteristic of Venetian painting. We can see examples in this work. Weiss wears a crown of white flowers, cyclamens, a flower allegedly used for love potions, skin brightening, or as a poison. More curious, however, is Hercules' costume. Unlike the two women or the figures in Wisdom and Strength, he's in contemporary dress rather than in Veronese's imagined dress of antiquity. Our chief curator, Xavier F. Salomon, offers the analogy of a 21st century figure in jeans and a t-shirt surrounded by people in togas. While the costume may not stand out to us, it's important to understand how jarring it would have been to a viewer of the time. Though his dress is consistent with the era, to wear all white was not. Why did Veronese choose this? In 16th century Venice, white was considered near equal in worth to gold. Even today, white is typically coded as moral, signifying an ideal of youth, virtue, or purity. Some art historians have suggested that the man is a young nobleman who was recently deceased. This may be supported by the inscription, Honored virtus post mortem florit, or honor and virtue flourish after death, meaning that our honorable and virtuous actions will outlive us. Critics of Veronese have claimed that his work is purely decorative, but this assumption ignores the cultural climate. Venice in the mid-16th century was one of the centers of the Renaissance, the cultural movement which emphasized the rebirth of antiquity, classical morals, and aesthetics. Above all, humanism, materialism, and naturalism. Venice, known for its theater, erotic writing, and decadence, presented a paradox between the city's luxurious lifestyle and the philosophy of the Renaissance, which emphasized humility and virtue. This opposition was further reinforced during the Counter-Reformation era, which pushed for a return for morality in society after problems in the Catholic Church were exposed. Veronese painted during that era and was absolutely aware of this contradiction. A lover of theater, he embraced theatricality and movement in his work. Beyond the vibrancy of pigment and the large size, we see this in the frozen moment of action, the exaggerated poses, and the low horizon line that brings the viewer into the stage space that dominates the foreground. He used this drama to heighten narrative tension. Notice how the Sphinx and dagger are placed, perfectly for compositional balance, but also for the viewer to take in. We acknowledge that Hercules does not. The poses of both vice and virtue mirror Hercules. The contortion of vice's torso and languid lines of her outstretched arms echo Hercules, while the rigid bend of his knee parallels that of virtue. To me, the most tension lies in Hercules' gaze. As virtue clutches him into her torso, he stares backward in the direction of vice. This raises questions. Does Hercules regret his choice? How active is he in his decision between virtue and vice? Are these morals that we choose, or are they imposed on us? These queries lack resolution, both to us and to the 16th century viewer, yet they continue to be revisited and keep us returning to this painting. Beyond its splendor, virtue and vice serves as a mirror for the commercial opulence of late Renaissance Venice and presents the viewer, whether 450 years ago or today, with an engaging opportunity to self-reflect. Thank you for taking a closer look with us at The Choice Between Virtue and Vice by Veronese.